Join the conversation
on Dubai Eye 103.8.
Hello there, good to have you listening. Georgia Tolley here, keeping you company all the way through until 1 p.m. Right, let's see what we're going to talk about now. Well, we've got 40 days into this crisis, and it's worth mentioning that about a month ago we spoke to the team from Dulsco about how they were managing and supporting their staff. They've got more than 25,000 workers across all sorts of different sectors in the UAE, from F&B all the way through to oil and gas. But when we first spoke to them, we were only about a couple of weeks in, maybe even 10 days in, and quite a lot has changed since then. So we wanted to revisit the topic to find out the challenges that the team are facing right now. And I'm delighted to say that David Stockton, who is Group CEO of Dulsco Group, has done us the honour of joining us again on the line. Hello there, how are you, David?
Good morning, Georgia. Yes, I'm very well indeed, thank you. I hope you and your colleagues all remain safe as well.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. We are managing fairly well. It's just the homeschooling juggle that is difficult. But it has now been 40 days since this situation began. How would you describe what has changed for your workforce in that time?
Well, firstly, I think you got me out of a balance sheet reconciliation with the finance team this morning, so I'm delighted to be
glad to be of service
with you. Thank you. So, look, what has changed? I think we've seen, I guess, a semblance of balance appearing over the last probably week, where businesses that were initially affected have started to adjust their schedules, adjust their timings, and be far more flexible. I think obviously the initial fear and concern is very much still there, but it's now into the longevity of that fear and concern. And that's something that we're obviously having to adapt to. And I think the third thing that we've certainly seen is far more engagement with our teams right across the business, in terms of them wanting to understand what does that long term look like. Initially it was the short term protection from a health and safety point of view. Will I get paid? But now it's into what does the long term look like? And at the moment, we're obviously we've been watching, we've been planning, we've been waiting, and we're executing. And that is being done on a daily basis to ensure that we're ready for a dial up. But equally, should things change and trigger points are achieved, then we'll take some specific actions when that happens. But at the moment, we'll continue to push forward.
Have you had to make any difficult decisions? I mean, we hear from all sorts of different sectors of the economy that, people are reducing salaries and saying, you just work a 3-day week and we're adjusting your salary accordingly. We've heard of people, closing up shop and saying, that's it for the season. You're not fired, you're furloughed. Come and see us again in September when the season starts again. Q3 and Q4 are going to be crazy. How have you made any of those decisions yet, or are you still in a wait and see vibe?
Yeah, look, we've been here for 91 years, so we've ridden out many waves, and I've been fortunate to have 10 years of those waves. We also have a lot of levers in terms of what we have as a business. So we naturally have attrition of people in a business our size that leave every month and choose to either to leave us to join somebody else or to leave country and return home. So traditionally we would have that, and that number really hasn't changed in the last 4 weeks. The next 4 weeks will be the interesting vibe and what happens with that. So that's one lever that we're able to work with. Some of our clients in particular, you can understand that the bigger industries such as aviation and the seaports have been affected, probably more so than others alongside hospitality. But to be fair, to be working with our customers and our partners to ensure that we are able to hold on to our staff so that when we see a resurgence, part of that planning, we can dial up the workforce when we need them. So we haven't had to lay people off. What we've done is move them in roles into other areas. We've obviously got people who take leave 30 days, 60 days, whatever it may be. And we've asked some of those people to bring forward that leave. And quite frankly, some of them have been delighted. And some people have formally requested to leave country and go on leave and see what happens in 30 or 60 days. And that's worked well with those levers, and we'll continue to assess that. But equally, as we've seen schedules and commitments increase, we've had to adjust that and move them out of other industries. But we're seeing a lot of what we call brown box movements, with people ordering at home. Obviously, you yourself are facing the homeschooling. We're seeing a greater demand in our environmental business. We're picking up more waste from home, so we're having to schedule more work. And there's been some customers that have actually taken on more people, because we're seeing either more cargo flights, we're seeing more distribution around the country, and that's helping us to balance that staffing need for the short term, whilst again we take a look at what does the medium to long term look like.
Can I ask you, since you've been doing this for 10 years in this country, can I ask you to cast your mind back to COVID? Because I know that back then, I mean, was it something like 800,000 people left for a few months and then came back? I mean, I can't remember the exact numbers, but they were huge. And the only concern with people leaving is that if you've trained them up to do a job, are you then going to get them back? And I just wonder what happened during COVID, whether you lost any staff and whether you managed to pull them all back in again straight away, or whether there was a bit of a skills gap post-COVID for you.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. Look, we made the right decision, I think, and it's one of the things that you think about legacy, and we didn't actually let anybody go. We moved people around, and as I said, the brown box movement during COVID was vast. So we took people out of aviation, obviously, because aircraft were grounded, and we moved into a lot of brown box movement and supporting some of the medical industries that we had in our.
What's brown box movement? That must be an industry term.
Distribution. So 3PL logistics. So the Amazons of the world. So everyone was ordering everything for home, whether it was for personal consumptions, etc. So when the dial-up happened back in aviation, in particular, we were able to move those skill levels people back to their aviation roles and backfill locally. So for us, it worked exceptionally well. This is slightly different. Again, during COVID, we didn't know how long this was going to last for, and again in this, we don't know how long this is going to last for. So you almost have to hedge, because our clients work with us to keep those skills, retain those skills, because it takes time, as you rightly say, to be able to train up people that whether it's a refueling of an aircraft or loading an aircraft, that is a skill. Whether you're working in the docks and actually unloading containers, that is a skill, and we want to retain that, as do our clients. So we find ways to be able to retain that staff, keep them engaged with us. Our welfare teams are working with the staff that perhaps aren't working the normal hours, but they're working slightly less hours, doing other roles which aren't as taxing for them mentally, and therefore we're engaging them in other ways in the accommodation sites or in some of the gyms that we operate within our accommodation sites as well.
Okay, so 1 month since we last spoke, how are your staff doing? How are people feeling? With so many under your umbrella, you can really sort of take the temperature of the workforce.
Yeah, look, I think they're in pretty good shape, to be honest. They've been through that initial, this is such a shock for everybody, the fear. Obviously, I think the UAE government obviously doing a tremendous job in keeping us all aware and safe. We're constantly engaging with our teams, both face to face, either in their workplaces or within the accommodation sites. I think the mood is fairly positive. It will all depend on what happens over the coming weeks. At the moment, they're seeing their work lifestyle remain fairly similar. And obviously, everyone's hoping that can return to some form of normality. But I think we are seeing a slight reset in terms of what will be the new norm and what comes out of this over the coming weeks. And again, we'll all have to adapt to that. We've seen fuel prices increasing dramatically, which is obviously causing us as a great mover of people to ensure that we manage that as tightly as we can, because clearly we still need to ensure that we're investing for the future of the business as well.
Is there a point, this is a very unfair question, so I'm sorry about this, I'm sort of mentally preparing you for it. Is there a point, as a business leader, we're now 40 days in, is there a sort of, not a breaking point, but is there a Rubicon to cross? Once you get to 80 days into the event, or is it 2 months into the event? At what stage do you okay, we really need to take stock now and start making big changes? Is there a sort of a day, a number of days into this conflict that moment arrives?
No, absolutely there is. I mean, we are a service industry, and we service industries that need us, whether it's human capital, or it's an environmental management, or, as you said, the oil and gas industries. Those industries and diversity that we have help us to use different levers. You go through the normal metrics of people go on leave. You then have a natural attrition of people. You then look at your client mapping in terms of what industries are being the most affected, what skills need to be retained. Can we repurpose those skills into other industries, perhaps, that are still going? But ultimately, there will potentially come a point where something has changed so dramatically, you have to make some tough decisions. That is then when you start pulling the other levers of unpaid leave, hours to pay, and then ultimately you start to go, well, I need to downsize. And you downsize, again, linked to what does the short, medium and long term look like, and adapt your business both in the front line and the support functions to be able to do that. And those are business decisions that one has to take every day, whether there's a conflict or any other crisis. It is a normal business practice to ensure that your business is fit for the sustainability of itself for the long term and its people.
And the problem is, at the moment, we just don't know what's going to happen. David Stockton, an absolute pleasure to have you join us on the agenda once again. Thank you very much indeed for your time. David Stockton, Group CEO of Dulsco Group. They are responsible for more than 25,000 staff. Thank you very much indeed for your honesty, your transparency and your analysis. Appreciate it.
Your ARN News.